The build world is moving into a new phase where success is measured not only by how efficient or engaging a space is, but by how it improves people's lives. As technology, design, and human needs come together, experiences are becoming more than moments of interaction. They are opportunities for real change. Commercial real estate reflects this shift. Buildings are no longer just assets or amenities. They are platforms for connection, learning, and growth, where every detail shapes how people feel and perform. The next generation of spaces must go beyond offering services to create real, meaningful experiences, places where people can thrive and communities can grow.
Goods and services are no longer enough. Goods and services are everywhere becoming mere commodities. And that means it's time to move to a new level of economic value, to go beyond the goods and services to staging experiences for your customers.
Please welcome Joe Pye.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I always hate seeing myself right before I go on. I mean, that's just terrible. I'm going to say that exact same thing, in 5 minutes. But it is a pleasure to be with you, and we've talked a lot this morning about various real estate technologies and what's going on in the world, from AI to data centers to from knowledge towns to quantum cities and that. So I thought I would start with a particular piece of retail technology, I'll say, that I think is very telling. Let me know if you've ever seen this particular piece of technology before. Right, you've seen these. It's known as the Gumball Wizard from a company called Global Gumball, and it truly revolutionized the gumball industry. Where what happens, if you haven't seen one, is a kid takes a quarter, comes up to the Gumball Wizard, excitedly puts his quarter in the slot, turns it, and then doesn't get a gumball, at least not right away. First, he gets this gumballing experience as it goes spiraling down clickety-clack as it goes. Now, there's no functional purpose whatsoever for this device. You don't get a better manufactured good. The gumball is the same as it's always been. You don't get better service. In fact, you can say the service is worse. Why? Right, it takes longer to get the gumball that you requested, and yet it has more value. It has more value because of that gumball spiraling experience that it creates. I've seen kids go up to their parents, ask them for a quarter, come over to the Gumball Wizard, put that quarter in the slot, turn the crank, and have that gumball spiraling experience, pick up the gumball, throw it away, and go ask their parents for another quarter. It's really just a slot machine for kids is what it is. And why do we see technologies like this? Well, it is because of a very fundamental change in the very fabric of the economy, where we've gone from an agrarian economy based off commodities to an industrial economy based off goods, and into a service economy. But today, we're in an experience economy. An economy where experiences have become the predominant economic offering. That experiences are what consumers want today. And experiences are memorable events that engage each and every individual in an inherently personal way. Right? And it's that memory that's the hallmark of the experience. And what's happened as both cause and effect of the experience economy is that goods and services have become commoditized. Right? Commodities are treated like commodities where people basically buy them based off of price and convenience. Right? And that's when you know you're a commodity. And so that means it's time to shift up this progression of economic value, to go beyond goods and services to staging experiences for your customers, right? Including your tenants, and helping your tenants stage those experiences for its employees, and for them to stage for retail customers and so forth. Right? All of it is wrapped up into this experience. We need to innovate in experiences. That hit home for me a number of years ago when I was in Milan, Italy, and giving a boardroom presentation to a number of different executives. One of them was the vice president of Maxwell House in Europe, and he said something that floored me. He said, there's been no innovation in the coffee industry in 15 years. And I said, are you kidding me? Have you never heard of Starbucks? Because for him, innovation was in goods. It was Maxwell House was a manufacturer, so it's like they had blinders on and only innovated in manufactured goods, only thought about it that way. Totally missing the innovation in the coffee drinking experience that Howard Schultz created at Starbucks. The irony being it was actually Milan, Italy that inspired Howard Schultz when he saw the coffee culture that was there to bring that same sort of Italian culture back to the United States and increasingly export it around the world. Now compare what Maxwell House did or didn't do in terms of innovating with the Nespresso brand out of Nestle. Right, Nestle Espresso brand with the capsule system that they have, if you can see the writing there, the tagline, the best cafe, yours. Right, subtext, not out at Starbucks, not outside, but in your own home with an espresso machine that they created. So they innovated in many different ways, including in the espresso machine. This is a physical good, but they designed it so that the use of that physical good, just making a cup of coffee for you in your home with your own individual capsule, is an experience. They then innovated in Nespresso boutiques, where they created their own experience places, places where people can come in and spend time with the brand, to show them all that it is. They'll even make a cup of coffee for you in the place to show off the Nespresso machine, to show off their varieties of coffee, the capsule system and that. And they understand the basic principle that when we shift to an experience economy, that the experience is the marketing, that the best way to generate demand is to get people to experience your product before they buy it. And then the chances they will buy it, in fact, goes up. They also innovated an espresso club where they have services to replenish your particular varieties of coffee automatically. And it's another basic principle of the experience economy that when you get into staging experiences, it just doesn't hurt if George Clooney is your spokesperson. Not sure why that is. Right, so if you think about it, coffee perfectly exemplifies this progression of economic value that I'm talking about. Because coffee at its core is what? Beans, right? Beans. You know it's a commodity. You can actually look up the future price of coffee, right? That tells you it's a true commodity. And if you convert that future price from a per ton to a per cup basis, you know how much coffee costs per cup when you treat it as a commodity? 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 cents. I mean, it goes up and down because it's a commodity, but that's what farmers get, right? Just a few cents. But if you take that coffee and you grind it, roast it, package it, put it on a grocery store like Maxwell House does, now you get 5, 10, 15, 20 cents per cup of coffee. If you then perform the service of actually brewing it for a customer in a vending machine, a corner diner, a bodega, 7-Eleven somewhere, and now you get 50 cents, $1, $1.50, or $2 per cup of coffee, excuse me, but surround the brewing of that coffee with the ambiance and theater of a Starbucks, and now how much are you paying? I used to say $2, $3, $4, then I said $3, $4, $5, then I said $5, $6, $7, right? The one I got yesterday at the Logan Airport was $7.44, right, per cup. It actually wasn't coffee. I hate coffee. It was chai. But anyway, per cup. Right? It shows you this basic progression, how every time you go up this progression, you create more economic value. And you get, therefore, to charge a premium for your experiences or charge explicitly for those experiences. It's hard to talk about the experience economy without talking about these people. Experiences have always been around. This is not a new economic offering, just newly identified. Most economists still place it in the services bucket, which is now 80% of employment and 80% of GDP, right? We need to pull it out of there and recognize experiences as a distinct economic offering. And of course, a big demarcation point for that was July 17, 1955, when Walt Disney opened up Disneyland, right? The world's first theme park, as he called it, right? Very different. And people go to Disneyland, right? They buy a lot of goods, Mickey Mouse hats, Mickey Mouse watches. They buy a lot of services, parking services, food services, photographic services. But why do they go? Right? For the experience. With that memory that lasts not just days and weeks, but months and years afterwards, that drives the demand for everything else that they are selling there. Had the opportunity a little while ago, my wife actually took me for my birthday to Pebble Beach, right? Just a wonderful experience, big golfer, loved Pebble Beach. It was amazing, but it actually has nothing to do with what I'm talking about this morning. But my accountant said if I showed it to you, I'd be able to write it off on my taxes. I also took my wife to Vegas. And of course, it's the experience capital of the world. Everything about it is experience. But notice it's not just about consumers, right? This is the #1 place to go in the world for business-to-business trade shows. The business to business is increasingly about the experience as well. You look at any sort of trade show, and it's about coming in and understanding, again, that the experience is the marketing, that they expose you to their products, they let you try them out, test them out, use them, and then it generates demand for what they're doing. So whether in consumer or in B2B, you find that the experience is increasingly the most important thing. The goods and services are, again, being commoditized. My favorite B2B example of that is Case Construction, which in Tomahawk, Wisconsin, created this Tomahawk Experience Center, they call it, where they bring people, the potential clients, up to experience all their equipment. Right? So all these construction folks are coming up there. It's basically a big sand pit. They do a lot of contests about who can move the most amount of dirt in the shortest amount of time. And they did a study a number of years ago where they looked at their sales, and if a potential client goes up to one of their dealers, they have maybe a 20% chance of getting that business. They bring it up to the Tomahawk Experience Center, it goes up to 80%. Right? From 20% to 80% because the experience is the marketing. And I want to make clear that I'm talking about distinctive experiences, experiences as a distinct economic offering. What I'm not talking about is CX. And how familiar measure CX or customer experience in your companies? Well, not that many. Wow. So we got a few. But a lot of companies, they are looking at CX. And when people talk about CX, what they generally mean is let's make our interactions with our customers nice and easy and convenient. And those are all well and good, but they're service characteristics. They're not experience characteristics. When you get into the experience economy, for which many companies now recruit and hire chief experience officers, CXOs, recognize that nice is nice, but rarely does it rise to the level of memorability. And if people do not remember your offering, then it was not a true distinctive experience. And when we make things easy, we often routinize things for our employees to make it easy to serve our customers, and that gets in the way of being personal. And experiences are inherently personal. In fact, no two people ever have the same experience, because the experience actually happens inside of us. Right? You got to reach inside of your customers. You got to engage them inside and be personal, then create that memory. And then finally, convenience is the antithesis of what I'm talking about. Right? Convenience is a commoditizing factor. Convenience means let's get in and out as quickly as possible. Let's spend as little time with customers as possible. When with experiences, what customers actually value is the time that they spend with you. Right? That's what they're buying from you, is the time that they are spending with you. And if they spend time in your places, right, it means that you're in the experience business. John Jurdy, probably the most famous experience architect, he's actually the guy who coined the term placemaking, or at least popularized it. And he talks about experiential design, that what we do is design time. Right? When you're placemaking, when you're creating places in which people are spending their time, you need to design time. The primary design focus is not an object, not the building, not the edifice, not the offices, not the retail areas, but time itself. It's designing what happens to people in time in a place. In fact, you can think about it this way. You can draw a line between any one of these economic offerings and talk about all these different economic distinctions between them. I got several tables in the book, The Experience Economy, just on that. But let me boil it down to one. Whether you're selling commodities, goods, or services, what you're offering your customers is time well saved. That they value what you're doing is you're saving their time. You're doing things for them. In fact, people want goods and services to be commoditized, to be bought at the lowest possible price and the greatest possible convenience in order to spend their money and their hard-earned time on the experiences that they value. And what those experiences provide is time well spent. Right? You're in the time well spent business. The people value that time that they spend in your places. That's what the experience economy is all about. So for example, the late Tony Hsieh, CEO of Zappos, talks about their philosophy as delivering happiness, right? And and basically to create that memory. So one of the things they did in their call centers at Zappos, and they're famous for it, is they got rid of measuring AHT, or average handling time. Right? All call centers are measured on AHT, and what they want to do is they want to reduce that. They want to become more productive. But what that means is they're reducing the time that they spend with customers. And often this is the only human-to-human contact that customers have with the company. And they say, we want to get that down as little as possible because it's costing us money, instead of recognizing the value in the time that's spent there. What they call customer services representatives at Zappos the customer loyalty team. And what they try to do is create what they call a PEC, a personal emotional connection, with every buyer on every phone call. And when they create that emotional connection, right, then they formed a relationship with them. In fact, at the end, and because they recognize it's not a one-period model. It's not about this phone call. It's about the lifelong relationships, and we want them, whenever they're in the mood to buy shoes, we want them to come to us, right? So it's a multi-period model. In fact, every day in the Zappos call center, they celebrate the person, the customer loyalty member that got to spend the most time with the customer that day, right? They celebrate that, not try and squish it down. The record is 10 hours and 43 minutes with a lunch break. But that person is a customer for life, right? And always will come back to Zappos for that. You see it in B2B arenas, like in training and employee arenas, as well as in training. And meant to mention at the Zappos that he talks about delivering happiness not just for customers, but for employees as well. So Whirlpool, the appliance manufacturer, for example, completely redesigned its sales training program, where they have salespeople that go out to their channel partners to try and sell their appliances when they come out. And what they did is they bought a condominium complex in St. Joseph, Missouri, and now whenever they have a sales class, they have several per year, they house them in this complex. So they're not out there in a hotel somewhere, they're all there together. In fact, all of the sessions happen in the community room inside this apartment building. And then they also never have to go out for dinner. Instead, they are in the kitchen of the place and they're preparing meals for each other using Whirlpool appliances. They do their own laundry using Whirlpool appliances, getting used to these things and learning every technical detail about them. In fact, the final exam, if you will, of the sales process is that they make a dinner for top executives at Whirlpool and then share that dinner with them. And ever since they've been doing it, since 1999, their retention rate of salespeople has gone up 50%. And because of that experience that they've created for them, that gets the entire employee relationship off to a great start. Cortland is a residential apartment building company based in Atlanta, and they talk about having resident-first experiences. I love that. Their focus is not on the apartment. They don't measure things having to do with apartments. They measure things having to do with residents, right? They focus on the residents. Give them inspiring spaces, elevate their living, and go beyond. And what they're really about is going beyond. They want to go beyond anything that you've seen before. They hired a chief experience officer right out of Disney who uses Disney techniques as well as some of the Chick-fil-A uses in Atlanta and other places. And if one example of going beyond, when the pandemic hit, they had people at Cortland that called every single resident, that's over 100,000 people in their apartments, to make sure they're okay, to see if they needed anything. And because they viewed that as as a resident-first business. An amazing thing that they did there. Jeff Bezos talks about a customer-centric approach, right? So he's focused on the customer and relentlessly focused on that. And what he loves to say, this is one of his shareholder letters, that customers are always beautifully, wonderfully dissatisfied. Even if they say they're happy, they're dissatisfied. And you can figure out those points of dissatisfaction, then you can innovate new things, right? Thinking on their behalf, things that they hadn't thought about, and invent things that will provide economic value to each one of them. And that applies not just to consumers, but think of it also, just place the word with employee. Right? What if we're employee-centric and recognize your employees are dissatisfied and your tenants' employees are dissatisfied, even if they don't say it, even if they measure as happy? And how can you invent on their behalf? Or think about your tenants. What does it mean to be tenant-centric and recognize that tenants are always dissatisfied with something, even if they report that they're happy? And how can you invent on their behalf? And that, yes, that can mean goods and services, right? They're never going away. But increasingly, that needs to mean invention in experiences. Experiences they value that provide that time well spent. We've seen a lot in businesses with the consumerization of technology and how wonderful we have all this great stuff as consumers, but in businesses, we're still living with legacy machines and that sort of thing, and we need to bring that in. I just, by the way, added Picnic this morning up there as an app. And increasingly what's happening is the creation of what I call experience platforms, right? Experience platforms. There's basically two kinds of experience platforms. One is matching platforms like Airbnb, right? You can book a room on Airbnb, it matches you to somebody that has a room or an entire house, whatever it might be. But then you can also choose all of these experiences and be able to match those, say what experiences would you like to have as well. And that gets closer to being an operating experience platform where the platform itself helps you create those experiences on demand for each individual person. My favorite example of that is the Carnival Corporation, which a number of years ago created the Carnival Ocean Medallion. Right? And the Ocean Medallion is a tiny little device about the size of a big coin, and has 3 different ways of communicating, and every customer that goes on there gets an Ocean Medallion with their name inscribed right on it. And they carry it around with them and allows them to identify each individual person. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to understand the guest genome of that individual person. So they ask you up front, what are the things that you would like to experience on your trip? What are some of your preferences that you have? And then thanks to the medallion, where every crewman can identify you by name because they pop up your name and your picture on a tablet that they have, they can then interact with you and figure out where are you going, what are you doing, what things do you like, what are your preferences, to then figure out that exact, again, guest genome for every individual guest that they have. And then operationalize that to allow the service people to be able to deliver those. And John Pageant, the former chief experience officer who invented this, says that it really freed up our servers, freed up our employees, our cast members, to be able to deliver greater service. So they can go up to you and actually identify what it is that you want at this particular time, right? Whatever it might be. So for example, when you're on the pool deck with your kids, your favorite drink might be an iced tea with no lemon. When you're in the bar with your buddies, it's a mojito, but when you're in a restaurant with your spouse, it's a glass of Shiraz, right? Same person, different markets that you're in, different things that you want. Right? So increasingly we're seeing platforms that are being developed like that to offer these experiences to individual ones. It even creates an itinerary for them, a mass customized itinerary. And that's actually how I discovered this progression of economic value. It was actually when I spent a year at MIT. I worked for IBM at the time, and they, as a reward for a project I did, they sent me to MIT to get my master's in the management of technology. And I found out I had to do a thesis when I came here. And so I said, well, I'm going to do a thesis I can turn into a book. Right? And that's what I did. I outlined a book. I got the first 4 chapters done when I was at MIT, and then finished the rest of it when I got back to IBM. And the basic notion is that we can now mass customize. We can now give every individual person exactly what they want, but do it with high volume, with efficient operations, with low cost. Right? That's what mass customization is. What I eventually figured out is that mass customization automatically turns a good into a service. Right? It turns a good into a service. You design a physical good that's exactly what this person needs at this moment in time, right? Then you really help them define what it is and then make and deliver it to them as an individual. So for example, you've probably all seen the Coca-Cola Freestyle machines, where they have basic choices for the base if you want regular Coca-Cola, Diet Coca-Cola, or Coke Zero. Then you can go up and they have a push-button system to figure out, well, what am I looking for right now? And you begin to combine these things together. You can have Barq's root beer, you can have Fanta orange and these other drinks. You can add cherry and lemon and lime and vanilla and other things. You can create what I think the kids call suicide drinks and mixing all this stuff together. What I do is I love Coke with lime. So I go up here, I pay for it, I get my cup, I put it in there, I pick Coke, I pick lime additive, I start pouring it into my cup, and it goes up to about 80% full, and I switch over to Coke Zero with lime, so I just reduce the amount of sugar that I have a little bit. So it's basically infinitely customizable in there. Right? But, so what has it done? Right? This used to be mass-produced in a factory somewhere, in a bottling company, right? And then shipped in the store, and you're buying the same things everybody else is buying. But now it brings it all together to give you exactly what you want at this moment in time. In the same way, if you design a service that is so appropriate for this particular person, exactly the service that they want at this moment in time, then you can't help but make them go, wow, and turn it into a memorable event. Turn it into an experience. If you think about Ritz-Carlton hotels, for example, they have this great CRM that they call Mystique, because they want this mystique about how do they know exactly what you want. So what happens is that whenever you go to a Ritz-Carlton, you express any preference, they write that down. It becomes part of this system that they have in the sky, where they'll remember your preferences from trip to trip to trip. So for example, or stay to stay to stay, if you go to a Ritz-Carlton hotel and you have allergies and you ask housekeeping for hypoallergenic pillows, well, they'll dutifully bring that up to your room. They put that into the system. Now that's part of your profile. The next time you go to Ritz-Carlton, never even been there before, in some other part of the world, hypoallergenic pillows will be on your bed before you arrive. So you don't even have to ask for them. Whatever your preferences are, they presciently deliver it to you. Right? It's not about asking 20 questions and figuring out what you want, but they presciently do what you want. Right? Create this mystique experience. But how do they know that? How do they do that? And it elevates the experience that they create for their customers. The core thing about mass customizing is basically modularizing, right? Like Lego building bricks. What can you build with Legos? Anything, right? Anything you want. Why? Because you have a large number of modules and a simple and elegant linkage system for snapping them together. That's what modularity is, modules plus linkage system. It allows you to design and produce for each individual customer that you have. Now think not of just Lego bricks, but think of zeros and ones. Anything you can digitize, you can customize. Once it enters the realms of zeros and ones, you can instantaneously change a 0 to 1 and vice versa. So if you embed what you do in digital technology, or allow it, like with the ocean a medallion for Carnival, to drive what your employees do for your customers, then you can efficiently, seamlessly, costlessly, and frictionlessly do exactly what they want. And so think about this progression of economic value, though, going on, right? Because experiences can be commoditized as well. In fact, experiences may be the easiest economic offering to commoditize. The second time you have an experience doesn't tend to be as good as the first. The third time, not as good as that. And pretty soon customers are saying, been there, done that. That's the hallmark of a commoditized experience. So using the same heuristic, where customization is the antidote to commoditization. Commoditization is like the law of gravity. It just drags you down year after year after year. If you do nothing, your offerings will be commoditized. Customization lifts you up. You cannot help but be differentiated, meaning not a commodity. You can't help but be differentiated if you work with each individual customer. Understand their individual desires, needs, and aspirations, and then give them exactly what they want. So what happens when you customize an experience? When you design an experience that's so appropriate for this particular person, exactly the experience that they need at this moment in time. You can't help but change into what we often call a life-changing experience, an experience that changes us in some way, and that I call a transformation. Transformation is the fifth and final economic offering in this progression of economic value. We're using experiences as the raw material to guide people to change, to help them achieve their aspirations, to help them become who they want to become. Right? That's what you think about any business that's in the business of helping people be healthy, wealthy, and wise is in the transformation business. Right? To use Ben Franklin's old phrase. They're all about aspirations. And it seems to me that in this room, everybody here is about helping tenants and their employees be healthy, be wealthy, and be wise. Right? It's all wrapped up into there. Right? So I think you need to understand that you should be or are in the transformation business. Think about education. Since we're at MIT here, I got my master's degree here. Right? Why do people go back to business school and get a master's degree, an MBA, or whatever it might be? Is it because of the ideas of the higher education? You know, the ideas are pretty much all the same. Professors got to publish. They all have access to the same ideas. Right? They are commodities. No, that's not it. Is it because of the physical goods, the computers and the notebooks and all the books and all the accoutrements that they have to buy? Or that's certainly not it. Is it because of the homework analysis and other services that the professors do? Right? That's really not it. Is it because of the classroom experience? Right? Well, that's getting closer. Or the networking experience, the meeting of other people in your classroom, you're often forming lifelong relationships. Yep, you're absolutely going for those reasons. But fundamentally, You're not going unless you want to be transformed. You're not spending tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of dollars to get a master's degree, get an MBA, unless you want to be transformed. Unless you want different skills, different knowledge, different capabilities, different career, unless you want to be a different person. One business school that recognized that is the London Business School, where the former dean John Quelch once told Fast Company magazine that we're not in the education business, we're in the transformation business. We expect everyone who participates in the program at the London Business School, whether it's for 3 days or for 2 years, to be transformed by the experience. Right? That's a different mindset. That's a different economic offering, right? Built on top of the experiences that you have there. Anything having to do with coaching, whether it's golf coaching or tennis coaching or think about life coaching, executive coaching, speaking coaching, all the different things, whether it's actually called a coach or a guide or a guru or a therapist or a counselor or a shaman or a wizard or an alchemist or whatever it might be, right? The explosion in coaching over the last 20 years is unbelievable. It's because it is in the transformation business, and it recognizes that change is hard. Right? We have aspirations. We want to change, but it's incredibly hard to do. So let's go with somebody who's done this before with other people and help coach them through that. The economic function of the transformation economy, if you saw it in that progression of economic value, you extract commodities, you make goods, you deliver services, you stage experiences, and you guide transformations. You can't do it for them. They have to change themselves. And you have to create the conditions under which they can transform and under which they can achieve their aspiration. And coaching is a key thing. We also see the rise of platforms for this. So BetterUp is a coaching platform based in California, very science-based, that they particularly work with companies when they're undergoing a digital transformation, as it's called, not necessarily the right name. But then they work with the company to offer access to coaches from around the world for their management, their executives, and often their employees as well. They ask them to answer some questions about what they're looking for in the particular coaching. Then they throw up 3 different people that you can select as your coach. You can go through them individually. You say, okay, yes, I want this person as my coach. If you don't like those 3, you can swipe left and get another 3 that you can do. And then you have these sessions, it's a virtual sessions with an individual coach that extends through time, that allows you to go over things so that you can achieve the transformation that you need as an employee when your company is undergoing a transformation. So I call this an experience platform, right? An experience platform. A transformation platform using Delta as the universal symbol for our transformation. If you went to MIT, you'd know that, but most of you know that, right? Delta. Right, so Delta means transformation, sign of change, and there are increasingly transformation platforms that are coming out. And I'm coming out with my next book, The Transformation Economy, in February, where I talk about these and use many different examples. And the basic idea, though, is to understand that for you, the tenant is the product. Right? The tenant and their employees is the product. With transformations, inputs don't matter. The activities you do for them, even the experiences you create for them, don't matter unless they get the outcomes that they want. You got to move from inputs to outcomes, to understanding these real meaningful outcomes that tenants want, often for their employees. And if you can focus on those, that you again create much greater economic value. But it's changing them that is the product of what you are doing. So it's all about achieving aspirations, which is understand where are they today and what do they want to become. So you want to create from-to statements. You may have a generic one that you're working on at large, but for each individual one, we're all idiosyncratic in what we're looking for. Right? What is the from-to statement? Where are they today and what do they want to become? Then you can design the set of experiences. Generally, it's not one life-changing experience, but the set of experiences that allows them to go from who they are today to what they want to become. So, for example, Heartland Health is a healthcare company in St. Joseph, Missouri, a very lower-end socioeconomic place. And they decided to come up with a theme of the experience, but it really wasn't a theme. It was really the meaningful purpose of this organization. Its meaningful purpose became to live life well. Live life well. They want their patients who come here, right, hundreds of thousands of people, to live life well. They want those family members of those patients to live life well. They want the community to live life well. They want their own caregivers to live life well, so out of that abundance, they'll be able to help the patients, their families, and the community live life well. And they completely changed how they saw what they did and how they treat their patients, how they treat their employees, how they treat the community. They, in fact, renamed it from Heartland Health to Mosaic Life Care, and they started redesigning their offices to exemplify how to help people live life well, truly being in the transformation business. The CEO, Mark Laney, now retired, talks about how dreams and aspirations live in us all. And this is what he wants to do, is to help everyone get their dreams and aspirations met. And they're going to be right there with you. They're going to develop a life plan for you that's mass customized to you individually to help you achieve those dreams and aspirations that you have. Here's what it now looks like and what they're focused on.
What could happen if we look at healthcare from a completely different perspective? If the experience was reimagined, reinvented, and re-engineered? What if the concept of healthcare became more about life care? Enter Mosaic Life Care, a reimagined, reinvented, re-engineered approach to healthcare. It's an approach that frames the doctor's office inside a vibrant life care center. It's a model that introduces you to new caregivers, like a life guide and life coach. And it's an experience that emphasizes customized comfort. Here at Mosaic, it's the physicians who lead us. But we follow a philosophy based on the heart, mind, and spirit. And we make distinctions between treating life, treating health, and treating illness. At the core of our approach is the life care model. And as part of it, we learn about your aspirations. We talk about health improvement and life improvement. And we help you achieve transformational change. Our method is unique, which is why we do things differently. Like offering you a customized life plan. Because doing things differently means understanding that we all have different goals. My life plan pairs you with a life coach, and together, you work toward goals relating to not just health, but also lifestyle, career, finances, creativity, relationships, and spirituality. And while we like to focus on preventing illness, we're also experts at treating it. As members of the Mayo Clinic Care Network, we give our caregivers access to some of the most powerful medical resources in the world. Wellness is more than just being well. It's about living life well. Welcome to a new forward-thinking approach to healthcare. More than healthcare. Life care. Welcome to Mosaic Life Care.
You can see everything that I talk about in that video. Right? Truly understand it's in the transformation business, focused on the aspirations, again, not just of the patients, but of their family members, of the community, and of their employees in order to be able to fulfill that life plan model that they give customized for every single person. In this progression of economic value, it's important to understand that every one of these economic offerings, right, they're all continue to go on. Employment is shifting up towards the top, percent of GDP is shifting up towards the top, economic value is shifting up towards the top, but we'll always have all five, and all of them contribute to human flourishing. Right? People buy your offerings, whatever that might be, because they want to improve their lives in some way, even at the commodity level. Right? That whatever you're offering, they view is going to enhance what they want, who they are, what they want to become, right? Help them flourish. Otherwise, they wouldn't be giving you money out of their wallet, out of their purse, or out of their account. Right? Whenever they are exchanging money for some economic offerings because they think they're going to be better off in some way. One of the things I stress in my next book, that in fact the reason for existence for business at all is to foster human flourishing. You're in the business of fostering human flourishing, of helping your tenants as businesses thrive, of helping their employees flourish, of helping the customers of them, when you finally get down to consumers, of helping them flourish, right? The reason for existence, why business exists at all. And all the ills that people talk about with capitalism, which in fact is the greatest force for good that's ever been invented, of helping people better off, of improving their standards of living, of helping them become who they want to become, which is really what flourishing is all about. All the ills that detract from that model is when you don't understand that you're really about human flourishing. When you think that your goal is to extract as much money out of people as possible. That getting people addicted to your offerings, right, is a good thing. Right? It's not. Profit is, in fact, the measure of how well you help your customers flourish, and their employees and their customers and those after them. In fact, you can think of it this way. The business raison d'etre, right? The reason for existence for business overall is to foster human flourishing. Every individual company needs to understand its own individual purpose. Like with Mosaic Life Care, Live Life Well is its meaningful purpose. It's how they foster human flourishing, by helping their patients, their family members, their community, and their employees all thrive and flourish themselves. Right? So that's at the business level. But inside of that business are, in fact, those customers, helping them flourish in what they do, and as I mentioned, their employees and the organizations. And so if you're selling to tenants, to businesses that are in your properties, right, part and parcel of your business purpose ought to be to help them flourish inside of those businesses as you help your customers thrive. But it extends further out as well to the communities in which you operate. Are you a net positive for the communities in which you operate? Are you extracting out of society, or are you contributing to society and also to the greater planets overall? And I want to be very clear, I am not talking about stakeholder capitalism. I'm not talking about that any of these people have any rights on you. They don't. I'm talking about you have a responsibility to them. Right? You have a responsibility to help people flourish, to be a net contribution to flourishing in the world, basically. One real estate design company that does that is We Choose Good. It's a company I highlight in my next book, where they're experience design innovation, where they basically have operating models for real estate development. Here they focus right now only on residential developments, but including on the tenants, the retailers inside those residents, and how can they be a force for good so that every resident has a better life because they live here than they would otherwise, that every tenant is better off than they would be, that the communities in which they reside are better off, right? About choosing good is how they phrase their meaningful purpose. We choose good. And it contributes at that entire level that I'm talking about on the previous slide. So let me close with this, and then we've got time for one or two questions of this progression of economic value. I talked about how all the bottom three provide time well saved, experiences provide time well spent. What transformations mean is time well invested. That your customers are investing their time with you, that will pay compound interest and dividends now into the future as they become better off, as they transform themselves, as they achieve their aspirations, as they flourish. And there's no greater economic value you can create than to help somebody achieve his aspirations. Thank you. Thank you. So we do have time for a couple of questions, depending on how long I answer. Any questions? We got some microphones. Yes.
Thank you so much. I'm Daryl with Hines here in Boston, and I'm the experience manager. Something I've just been weighing over the last 15 years in luxury hospitality, residential, Class A buildings is the use of the word tenant. I struggle with that. I have often found myself having to explain to what we would say an employee that they're a tenant. And they say, I don't live here, I work here, I'm not paying rent. And I've just been exploring with my team now at Heinz, previously with Industrious, how do we go about that? And I love if anybody wants to come up and say, here's a great synonym for tenant or an alternative. But it's something I'd love to introduce, and I'm curious your thoughts.
So let me give you some generic options, because you also should be thinking about what your employees are, or some variation of guide as well, right? Generically, commodities have markets. They don't even know who they actually sell to. It's all this anonymous market. Goods have users, services have clients, experiences have guests, and transformations, I'm introducing the term aspirant. This is what they really are, is aspirant, and you're helping them achieve their aspirations. So in your sense, because of hospitality, I think the best word is probably guests, to treat them as guests, particularly because it's used by Disney, I think, is the one who started using the term guest. But it's used by hospitality and hotels the world over. And so there may be other variations of that. Something I do all the time is I get out a thesaurus, right? I just start looking at words and see where it comes. And so I'd encourage you to do that, but not only at least consider the word guest for each one of them, particularly for the individual employees that work inside of your tenants, and then maybe there's another word for tenant that you want to be able to differentiate them. You know, like Procter & Gamble use customer and consumable. Greg, we got time for another question? All right.
Joe, thanks for an amazing presentation. I had an observation and a question. The observation is Alpha School now doesn't have teachers, they have guides, right? So I think it's an example of bringing this transformation into the schooling. So another one, in case you've not covered it in the book. The question is, doesn't feel like our kind of capital markets really is leaning into this yet. How do we get the capital markets to lean into flourishing, and what are some of the critical levers for change? It's
overall, that's going to be a very difficult thing to do, to get capital markets to lean into flourishing. Basically because of short time frame viewpoint that they have, right? The point of view about making returns so quickly. I fully believe, don't ask me to prove it, of course, but I fully believe that if you focus on human flourishing, you will gain much more over the long term, even though you might lose in the short term. And part of it is, how do you make sure your own business thrives, that it flourishes over the long term? And to do that, you need to constantly innovate. What often happens is companies will shoot up like this, and then they'll fall into mediocrity, and eventually they fail. Right? We need a way of thriving forever. And focusing on human flourishing, I think, is a core tenet of what it means to be able to do that. And you do sacrifice things on the short term in order to make sure that happens, but then you're not coming back later and laying off tens of thousands of people and failing and getting bought and all those sorts of things, because you're focused on what the true prize is, right? It's being a net positive for the world and helping people flourish. And then again, with profits as the measure of how well you do that. And if your profits go down, well, maybe you need to then, as a catalytic mechanism for innovating, rather than just automatically go to the point of, okay, let's get rid of people. Thank you very much.